Welcome to the Proactive Prevention Podcast with your host, Jim Mothersbaugh Jr. That's me, Jimbo in stereo. Are you ready to take proactive steps to shield your life and those around you from the impact of drugs, alcohol, and other harmful substances? If so, you're in the right place. Our mission is to empower and educate through compelling conversations with a diverse range of voices, from teens and parents to educators, medical professionals, and law enforcement, and more. Join us for in-depth interviews, real-life stories, and behind-the-scenes insights from our Road Radio USA school assemblies and the Proactive Prevention Podcast studio. At Road Radio USA, we're dedicated to creating engaging, impactful prevention education that inspires positive change. The Proactive Prevention Podcast is here to support anyone navigating the challenges of substance abuse, whether directly or through loved ones. Our goal is to provide the tools and knowledge needed to make informed, healthy decisions and to foster a community of empowered individuals who lead by example. Tune in, stay informed, and let's work together to create a healthier, addiction-free future for everyone. Today, we are honored to present a deeply moving episode featuring a courageous guest, Jason Fitzgerald, who shares his deeply personal experience with mental health and addiction. Jason opens up about his journey, offering a candid and profound reflection on the importance of compassion and the need to remove the stigma surrounding mental health and addiction issues. Join us for this powerful conversation that aims to inspire empathy and support for everyone facing similar struggles. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Jason Fitzgerald, and I'm Jim Mothersbaugh Jr. of Road Radio USA. Jason, thank you so much.
I know who you are.
Oh, do you?
I was in high school. You were. I don't mean for you to feel old. You're certainly not old. I remember your programs when I was in high school at Jersey Shore High.
The Road Radio USA show, huh?
Oh, that's right.
Well, thanks for you just made my day actually for saying that, because I'm not at the high schools all the time, but when I do get to the school and stuff, it's exciting to hear that somebody remembers the show. It's all about preventing underage drinking and other drug use.
I do. Maybe I should have listened a little bit closer, but
okay. Now, why do you say that? That's a good reason to get into the topic we're going to talk about here today.
I believe in being an open book on these kind of topics, even though for a while I didn't.
Right.
So my name is Jason Fitzgerald.
Okay.
I'm a college graduate. I graduated from Lock Haven University in 2005.
Okay.
I've been gainfully employed ever since.
Okay, great.
Primarily in political and government affairs type roles.
Right. Pretty popular too, I'd say, in the Williamsport area anyway. Lycoming County.
Well, yeah, I mean, we worked all throughout the state, but I, had certainly had built up some connections and contacts in Williamsport, and always tried to, do the best I could. My whole life, I've been speaking for others.
Right.
And, I'm a communications specialist by training, so whether it was political campaigns, messaging, advocating for my clients at my former role at Penn Strategies, or on behalf of political candidates, and my job was to speak for others. So I never really had an interest in being a public person.
Okay.
But I have used public means to communicate messages. And I am by nature a private person.
Okay.
So for about 20 years, I struggled with anxiety issues, sometimes very severe anxiety. And obviously being in a job where you never quite sleep or it's 24/7, I would oftentimes, allow, my work and other things to overshadow my private life.
Okay.
I have 3 great kids, and I feel like kind of a lousy Catholic. I have 3 children and 2 different women.
Okay.
Neither of whom I'm with, but both of whom I have a great relationship with.
Okay.
They're great mothers.
Okay.
But I was solely focused on career advancement for a very long time, and that created a great deal of anxiety for me. And I received mental health treatment, which growing up in a rural area, is something that's not to be discussed.
Okay.
And so, I was very guarded about that, and I shouldn't have been. I should have been more open about it. And about October, so throughout my life, I've done a combination of talk therapy and medication. And about October of last year, I had made some comments that were controversial, but true, demonstrably true. And a local political organization began to sort of try to edge at me or attack me, etc. And one of the things that they had leaked, and it could have been coincidental, was that I was struggling with mental health issues. So as a result of that, and I had always denied that publicly, I'm sorry that I did that in the past. I'm not going to do that in the future, because it was something that I didn't, you would be, I was wrong, but my perception was that if people believed that I had mental health issues, they wouldn't take me seriously. And so I was very guarded on that. But when that secret started to get out, the irony is I went to therapy more. I was prescribed more of the drugs that I was on to try to control my anxiety and other things. And by the first of the year of this most recent year, 2024, I was on 9 different prescriptions. I was like, I jokingly say, something to get up in the morning, something to go to sleep, I jokingly say I was like Elvis minus the talent.
Wow.
And so, some friends had become concerned about me. I do drink occasionally.
Okay.
But, obviously, friends would go out and say to the bartender, well, how many, I used to have 2 glasses of wine, very pleasant, very whatever, but...
Can you lead me to the specific circumstances that led to the events that led you to the start using the ADHD medication?
I was prescribed them. I always took them exactly as prescribed.
What were the events? Like, what happened that you did that? I mean, you might have been prescribed, but what happened? Are you able to, do you want to do that?
Oh, yeah, it's just extreme anxiety and stress related to these rumors that were in the community.
Oh, the rumors, okay.
Because, to me, I didn't care, they had called me a philanderer.
Oh, okay.
They had called me a drug addict. Which the irony is that the drugs that I was addicted to were drugs that I was legally prescribed.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Or I guess the technical term that my counselor and lawyer like me to use is became dependent upon. As opposed to, but I think it's really the same thing.
All right.
I don't differentiate my addiction from anybody else's. I'm no better or no worse. I mean, the same reasons. But so the stress and anxiety of that,
I see,
caused me to become more reliant upon these drugs. And the dosages then increased because my anxiety symptoms increased. I frequently went to the hospital, would have incidents in the emergency room. Where they would ask me, well, are you on any other kind of stimulants or any other kind of drugs? Why are you not sleeping? And I never really told them about the drugs I was prescribed because I figured you guys should know that. You gave them to me.
Yeah.
So, and a friend who saved my life, who's a local lawyer here, Chris Lavecchio, moved into my house with me under the conditions that under the auspices that he was. He has a successful law practice. He certainly could have lived on his own somewhere.
Right.
But he was really there to try and figure out what the heck is going on with Jason. Why is he deteriorating? And so, he would watch. I was able to function in society. I've always, no matter how I felt, whether I was down that day or up that day, I would get up in the morning and dress well and shave and do my best to get through the day. So to people who were, and by the way, I'm working with community leaders, law enforcement throughout the state, probation and parole officers, people who are trained to see if someone's off, and no one noticed it except for those closest to me. And some of that could be because of my personality is a little different than others. I mean, you've known me for years. I'm the type of guy, I go around, it's not out of the ordinary for me to go and talk to complete strangers and tell them things.
Right.
Obviously I'm doing that now.
Okay.
So, some of the behaviors that became more defined.
Right.
There would be a difference between me. I was slowly losing control of my self.
Okay.
I believe.
Yeah.
And not, paranoia and other things that come with drug use, even when it's a legally prescribed drug, was happening to me. And in a public realm, as somebody who doesn't want to be a public person, who again, I never minded allegations about women or drugs or whatever, but you start questioning my mental health, it bothered me. It shouldn't have. And I'm embarrassed that I didn't speak out on this topic earlier.
Okay.
And I mean, I want to answer your questions, but I mean, I'm happy to get into the final week before I was.
Okay.
I mean, so essentially what happened was the end of February.
Okay.
You know, my family and friends had come to me and said, look, you need to get some sort of help. You know, if it's psychological help, drug help, we can't figure out what the heck's going on with you.
Okay.
And I refused it. And, you know, the final week before I was ultimately hospitalized on a 302 admission, which is an involuntary commitment that comes because your family and others express concern, I was given many opportunities to simply take what probably I should have done, or I don't want to say that, but what I had an opportunity to simply go in a way that wouldn't have been embarrassing or whatever and check myself in, but I was so ashamed of having these issues that I couldn't control. So, you know, my final week, I was in the emergency room 6 times. I had been, you know, had encounters with the police in which every instance I was polite. Every instance I followed their instructions. I have no criminal charges.
Okay.
Each time I spoke with law enforcement, they encouraged, actually called paramedics, took me to the emergency room, but I talk for a living, I talk my way out, but I'm not a threat. I understand what you're saying, nurse or doctor, but I'm not a threat to myself, I'm not a threat to others, and you can't 302 me unless you can demonstrably state that I'm a threat to myself or others.
Okay.
The final day when I ultimately was 302, you know, my family and my attorney, whose job was to keep you out of confinement, right, when I get you in, you know, was able to convince you know, the police that I needed to be 302, and I was fully cooperative with them.
Okay.
And I still believed that I was going to get out of it because, you know, I didn't feel like I was, you know, I remember, you know, asking to be walked into the hospital in handcuffs as opposed to going in on a bed or a wheelchair because I didn't want to appear to be mentally ill. I would rather look like a criminal. I would rather look like an accused criminal than somebody who was mentally unstable.
Wow.
And so I, you know, was informed by the medical staff who were great. The police were great. The ambulance people were wonderful. They were so kind and caring, and they helped to save my life too, and treated me with respect and dignity, which I appreciate. And you know, they explained to me that I was going to be involuntarily sent to a facility for 72 hours.
Would you like to be more specific about that?
Where I went?
Yeah, would you like about some of the details?
Sure. I mean, so I was escorted in, as I recall, I was escorted into the hospital in handcuffs. I was wearing a tuxedo.
I guess what happened up to that? What were some of the things you went through?
Oh, so, you know, I was starting to, my attorney, a girlfriend at the time, had taken a trip with me, and she was a nurse, and she noticed that I was taking these prescriptions, and she believed that I was taking too many of them.
Okay.
All of which I was prescribed and legally and took as instructed, but I had them coming, you know, in such a way that, you know, with my health insurance or whatever, that I never sat down with my family doctor. And there was one nurse in an emergency room one time that said to me, you got to promise me that you're going to sit down with your family doctor and go over your prescriptions because I think that may be your problem. That was in November or December. I didn't do it. I'm not accusing. I'm taking full responsibility for my actions. I was a bad patient. Okay. Again, there can be reforms or whatever that can be made, but I take full responsibility. And I think that's the most important thing that you can do, because if you blame others, then you're saying that your addiction is, or whatever it is, isn't under your control, that it's under the control of others, and it is under your control at the end of the day. I knew something was wrong. But you know, the types of things was I would have memory loss. I would get on calls with people and not remember what the topic was. When, you know, normally when I'm coaching, you know, I never take notes to a meeting. Very rarely. I don't need them. I take notes, but I don't have prepared notes. You know, towards the end, before I went away to get what I call my breakthrough, I used to call it a breakdown. You know, I was having to take notes of what the topic was. to stay on topic.
Right.
You know, I started losing things. In some cases, my friends were taking things, because, you know, I wasn't someone who would drink and drive.
Right.
But, you know, you have a drink or two and you're on these substances, then it could be an issue. So,
Right.
you know, taking my car keys away and that kind of thing, or without knowing, because, you know, I'm an adult, they can't really tell me what to do.
Right.
I started to wander around town. You know, my friend who was living with me at the time, you know, he's got a family he's got to worry about in law practice. He can't be there all the time.
Right.
So I would start hiding, and I would go, and the places that I would go, you know, would be bars or whatever, have a couple of drinks, but drinking wasn't my problem. I never really thought that I had an addiction, because at points in my life I was like, I used to drink too much. I can demonstrably say that,
Right. That's
you
too
know,
much.
drinking a bottle of wine's too much,
Right.
but having a glass or two of wine at dinner
Right.
isn't too much. But when
Yeah.
you're mixing it with Adderall, which was the substance that I was on,
Right.
at a very high level, and as you can see right now, I'm on an allergy medication and a mood
Right.
stabilizer. I was on 9 medications before I went in there. I don't really need a lot of extra energy, if you can tell.
Okay.
I wasn't
Yeah.
sleeping. I wasn't sleeping. That's something.
Okay.
You know, my friend and lawyer who was living with me at the time would say, you know, he'd get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, have me down there mopping the floor.
Wow.
You know, and not sleeping, and then my balance of time would be off. So when I was supposed to take a couple days off of work to, you know, see what the heck was going on with me, and, you know, my car was moved, or somebody would be parked in front of my car to make it inconvenient,
Okay.
I'd throw my suit and tie on and walk down to my office on like Cumming Street, which is a pretty long walk in shoes like this.
Right.
And people would say, "Yeah, it's Fitzgerald." He walks in, you know. I would get rides. People would give me a ride. They'd stop and say, "What's going on?" You know, "Oh, I'm just heading down to the office." "Well, do you want to walk?" "Not really, but my car's blocked in, or I lost my keys." "Oh, I'll give you a ride." And nobody really, I think, noticed. But then you can't be getting into cars with people that you don't know or whatever, which I don't believe I did.
Yeah.
You know, I would start talking to, when I went into bars, I always knew the servers. I always had good relationships with servers in bars and restaurants, because I like people.
Right.
And I would know about them. I would start calling them by the wrong names, saying strange things. Never, my lawyer went and checked with everybody, never anything that was inappropriate,
Right.
you know, sexual or anything of that nature, but just strange things.
Right.
You know, like one time I told a bunch of them that I wanted to take them to a circus. You know, and the one person believed that we were going to the circus the next day at 10 o'clock. Others called Chris, you know, he'd be an interesting guest on here, you know, called my attorney up and say, "Hey, what's going on?" "No, he's a little off." And so, you know, the final day that led me up to that, I put a tuxedo on and went downtown and was singing karaoke. And I knew in my mind that it was a finale of something. I didn't know if I was going to be framed for some kind of a crime, if somebody was going to kill me, or if I was going to what used to be referred to as the nut house. And it ended up, the third option ended up being where I went. So I got there, and I noticed I was furious. First off, you know, my lawyer, in my opinion, is supposed to keep me out of things, not get me into them. My family is supposed to protect. Why am I down here in this place, essentially, you know, wearing the same sort? I would have rather have went to federal prison or something. I've toured those places. They're nicer than this, not to be rude.
Yeah.
And, you know, I didn't like being there. I was angry that I was there the first, you know, day or so. And then at the end of it, you have an opportunity to leave. You know, so you don't have a phone. You know, I came with a tuxedo on, and I had no money in my pocket. I had a money clip with no money in it.
Okay.
And so, but they take all of that from you. My family brought me cigarettes, and you can't bring you food. They bring you different clothes so that I could at least have some different clothing. And then at the end of the 72-hour period, you can leave, I think, as I understood it. But I made the determination after being convinced that I was had a problem with these substances, that I was going to check myself in. And so I don't know how exactly that worked, but I believe I agreed to do it up to a 14-day time period. So in addition, as I recall, in addition to the 72 hours, they, 14 more days. But keep in mind, my lawyer had taken my friend. I need to quit calling him my lawyer. My best friend, the guy who saved my life, took the drugs away from me a week or two before I went.
Oh.
And the difference is, and this is why it's interesting, if somebody's on heroin or crack or whatever, they would go looking for it. I was embarrassed that I lost my medications, and I never really asked. I asked him one time where they were at, and he said, I don't know, you must have lost them. Okay, so I was coming down off of these things, so that's why I think the behavior got so bizarre at the end, because all of these things that I was being medicated with had now been removed.
Okay.
So I think because of that, because I went in with a drug test that was, none of the stuff was in my bloodstream.
Right.
And then I got out in 13 days from that facility, and since then I've continued to do talk therapy and other things.
Okay.
I've had friends, doctors, and lawyers who have specifically told me to not do this interview.
This interview here?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I decided to do it.
Thank you.
Because they said that, first off, there could be a relapse in a situation. Which would be embarrassing.
Okay.
I'm confident that that won't occur, because my psychological profile basically was that I'm somebody who, as evidenced by the fact that when I had police encounters, I didn't say, hey, can I talk to the mayor? Can you get the senator on it? I mean, I downplayed who I was. I was completely polite and respectful with them, because that's the way I was raised.
Okay.
I allowed them to, at the time that they did a welfare check at my home, search my home.
Okay.
To see that there were no weapons or drugs or anything of that nature there. I allowed them to search my body, my person, my clothes. I usually dress like this. But that if a doctor, I trust doctors, I trust lawyers, I trust professionals. If a doctor tells me, take a red pill and a green pill and a yellow pill and run around the street, you're in underwear.
Right.
Hey, doc told me to do it, but I'm not blaming doctors, because I always put my company first, my family second, and myself third. It should have been in that order, and it's not anymore.
Right.
But I have no legal, I wasn't doctor shopping. I wasn't, but the reason that I wanted to do this interview, which would have been very, very uncomfortable for me to do a year ago, is because if I can do anything to be helpful, first off, to bring awareness to the fact that there is no shame in having mental health issues.
Okay.
I think that there should be parity between the treatment of mental health and physical health. You wouldn't be embarrassed to say that you had high cholesterol.
Right.
You wouldn't be embarrassed to say you had heart disease, even though there are things that lead to those. Because some people will say, well, the mental health is because they do this or that. Well, people have heart attacks because they eat too many cheeseburgers.
Yep,
People get lung cancer because they smoke cigarettes too much.
Yeah.
There are correlations there, but I don't want people to be ashamed of mental health. I think we have to take it out of the closet and talk about it.
I agree.
And I also don't think people should be ashamed about an addiction or a dependency.
Right.
I certainly you would not see me walking down the street and say that guy is an Adderall junkie, right? And,
Absolutely.
And there's no drug dealer in town that would tell you I'm an Adderall junkie either, because I bought them all legally as prescribed.
Exactly.
And I took them as prescribed.
Right.
So that's not a justification for me.
Right.
But I have the same problem. I equate it to this. Had I known a little bit more about this drug and about the details of it, and it was taken away from me, maybe I would have went out and looked for it. And so when someone has a physical health condition, and they get on these opioids, I never quite understood it. It's ironic because I went through the same thing. I always cast judgment a little bit on them. And I'm a Catholic, even though I'm not a good one, as indicated by my marital record. And I'm sure many other things. I went to a priest during the time and confessed, and I tried to change my patterns and different things in the way I treat people and everything to become a better person. But I used to look down a little bit. I wouldn't say it, but I'd say, yeah, but you were prescribed these things for pain, and then you went out and you started buying heroin. And that's where you cross the line. but it's no different. I don't know where my dependency or addiction would have led me. I was lucky. I'm a privileged person, and I understand that. And I feel that many people, I think, in a different category that didn't have the friends that I had or the resources that I had wouldn't have been treated the same way. And I understand that. And I feel a very strong obligation to make sure that that doesn't happen to anybody, not just upper middle class white guys.
Okay.
All right. If I were a person who didn't have the means that I had,
Right.
I'm not so sure that this would have ended the same way. I certainly know it wouldn't have ended the same way if I didn't have good friends,
Okay.
if I didn't have a good social network, if I didn't have family that cared about me. And those are all factors that are outside of someone's control.
Sure.
So for me to sit in judgment of others, I think that this was and again, I don't mean to be too religious about this, but I think that this was God saying to me, stop judging. You don't understand. You're, without knowing it, I was a hypocrite. And I wouldn't say it. The difference, I guess, between me and some people is I wouldn't say it, but I felt it.
Okay.
And that's, I've had friends and family members who became addicted to illegal drugs, and I didn't have the appropriate sympathy for them.
Okay.
And it started off the same way as mine started off. And mine could have went a lot worse.
Right. Okay. I can't argue that.
Yeah. And I think it would have. Had I not been in this town surrounded by friends
Right.
and family. And so I could have very easily kept this a secret. And but I always knew I wouldn't.
Okay.
Because that's just not my nature.
Right.
And look, this could have negative repercussions. Some people might say, hey, I don't want to hire this guy because he's, a Looney Tune.
Okay.
Well, all right. What's the difference between someone who acknowledges that they made a mistake and uses it to better, make things better, as opposed to somebody who hides? And I don't judge those who aren't in a position where they can speak. I have enough contacts throughout the Commonwealth. Someone will hire me, even if I've got to. I'll do anything, that's legal and provide for my family. And I've been fortunate, but some people have to be concerned about the repercussions on their job, or the other thing. The other thing is too is your kids hear about it. But you know what? I've raised my kids and their mothers, who are wonderful women.
Right.
Have raised the kids to be strong and to help others too. So I hope that they would understand that the only reason I'm doing this is for that reason.
Right.
And so I don't know exactly what. Well, I guess this is the first time I've spoken in a recorded way or on a program about this. I went around. I had to go all over the state of Pennsylvania and tell people who were my clients why they didn't hear from me.
Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what was the feedback you got from them?
100% positive.
Is that right?
Unequivocally 100% positive.
Good.
You'd be surprised the number of people that would say, of course I've never shared, back in 06, I was going through a divorce and I was going through this and that. Empathy is what I found.
Okay.
I found empathy and I found respect. I think that in certain circles, obviously this group, it's funny, this group that was attacking me before is attacking me still, saying, hey, the guy's a drug addict, he's whatever else. And so I spoke to someone about it and an attorney about it, and he said, well, the reason everybody knows about your struggles is because you tell everybody.
Oh.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
If I can save one person's life,
Okay.
one person's father, then I'm not suggesting that I even can with this.
Okay.
But if I could, or just make their lives a little easier, then that to me will make my existence on the planet worthwhile. I used to think it was because I was gonna host Meet the Press,
Okay.
because I have this big ugly Irish head. I thought it was like Tim Russert. Obviously that's not gonna happen. So maybe the reason I was put on the earth was to do something like this. The thing is, I've always been paid to speak for others.
Good.
And I like to speak it's nice to speak about myself,
Right.
but I guess I am speaking for others too, because
Yep.
you know, I think about the people who, you know, that I grew up with, you know, like
Good.
folks that work in a factory and or you know, blue collar people, teachers, firefighters, veterans
Good.
who struggle with PTSD
Sure.
issues.
Yeah.
You know, this country has no problem sending our men and women overseas to fight wars. We have no problem paying billions and billions of dollars to
That's
defense
exactly right,
contractors,
yeah.
but we don't. The response of the federal government is pathetic when it comes to the response to PTSD and the struggles that our veterans go through. And they talk about increasing the defense budget every year. They never shortchange Halliburton or these big corporations, but every single year they shortchange our veterans, and that's bullshit. Pardon my language.
You're right.
And you know, those people went through. I mean, what are my struggles? You know, I'm a blessed person. I never had to go to war. I had friends who went and fought a war. I've never had to see. I've lived a charmed life, and I'm having these issues.
And you're in the hometown of Piper, right?
I'm in the hometown of Piper, where I went to college. Forgive me, my allergies are acting up.
Right.
I grew up in Jersey Shore, but yeah,
Oh,
Piper.
okay.
But I went to college at Lock Haven, and I
Right.
love this area, and I've stayed
Okay.
here. You know, the other thing that it started to do is because of the alienation and other things with the anxiety and maybe a little bit of depression issues or other things, I was going to move out of the area.
Oh, were you?
So, and I wouldn't have told my story if I were in Philadelphia, which is where I was going to move to, because
Oh, really?
nobody cared.
Okay.
But thank God I stayed here in Williamsport, because if I were in Philadelphia, no one would have known me. No one would have been able to say, hey, Jason. As I said, a lot of people didn't notice it. People who knew me professionally did not notice it. People who knew me personally did. And people who would frequently, and again, it makes me sound like I'm out of the bars all the time. I'm a bachelor, so I eat out frequently.
Okay.
So I would know those people. Those people knew something was off, and were very kind to me.
Good.
So many people have been.
Very good.
Yeah. So I feel an obligation to give back in whatever way I can, and if just telling the stories to start, then we'll do that.
Jason, can you think of anything else you'd like to wind up with this wonderful podcast you're giving us right now? How would you like to wind things down right now?
I just want people to understand that there's no shame in having mental health issues. There's no shame in having an addiction. I think it's a darn shame if people don't try to get better. And I think that we should support people and stop being so judgmental. And as I said, I've judged people in the past, and I shouldn't have done that. And I think there's a Bible verse about that somewhere, right?
Yep.
But just whether or not someone's a Christian or whatever they are, I think that they can understand that, you know, human beings make mistakes. And I think most people try their best. And I think we just need to be more compassionate to each other. And don't be afraid to ask for help. There's zero shame in
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Thanks again.
All right, man.
Have a good day.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Wow. I hope you found Jason's story as impactful and enlightening as I did. It takes courage to face the stigma and openly discuss the journey through mental health and addiction, and Jason's experience serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of compassion and understanding. It's time for us to stop the stigma. If we take the time to learn more about substance abuse and addiction and re-examine our views about those who struggle with addiction, we can make great strides towards defeating the stigma that holds many back from seeking help. The fear of being stereotyped and judged can be a tremendous barrier to overcome for those struggling with addiction. 1 out of every 5 people in the U.S. struggles with addiction and substance abuse. It can affect anyone, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, income, education level, or faith. Addiction does not discriminate. If you or a loved one are struggling with addiction, there is no shame in seeking help. Thanks for listening to the Proactive Prevention Podcast. Until next time, this is Jimbo in Stereo.